The billionaire was already celebrating. Preston Sterling, a man who treated people like disposable assets, was actually high-fiving his lawyer while the mother of his child wept into her hands. It was over. The judge had heard the arguments, seen the bank accounts, and made his decision. Judge Caldwell raised his heavy wooden gavel. In 1 second, that sound would destroy a family. It would tear a 9-year-old boy away from the only parent who loved him and hand him over to a stranger who saw him as a tax write-off. The room held its breath. The gavel started to fall, but it never hit the desk. "Objection!" The scream didn't come from a high-priced attorney. It came from the back of the room. A small boy drowning in a suit jacket that was 2 sizes too big had climbed onto his chair. He was trembling, his knuckles white as he clutched a battered black notebook against his chest, but his eyes were burning with a desperation that stopped the judge cold. "Sit down, little boy," the billionaire's lawyer sneered, laughing. "The adults are talking." "I won't sit down," the boy shouted, his voice cracking but holding firm. "Because if you bang that gavel, Judge, you aren't just making a mistake. You're helping a criminal get away with it." The billionaire stopped laughing. And the judge? He slowly lowered the gavel. To understand why a 9-year-old boy named Elijah Barnes was standing on a chair facing down a room full of powerful men, you have to understand the war he had been fighting in silence. Elijah was the kind of kid who disappeared in a crowd. He wore glasses that were taped at the hinge because his mother, Maya, couldn't afford new frames until her next paycheck. He carried a backpack that had been stitched up 3 times. While other kids were playing video games or watching cartoons, Elijah was watching his mother. He watched Maya Barnes work 18-hour days as a nursing assistant, coming home smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion, her feet swollen, just to put food on the table. He watched her skip meals so he could have new shoes for school. And he watched the shadow that hung over their lives, the shadow of a father who had never been there. Preston Sterling wasn't just absent. He was a ghost made of money. Elijah saw his father's face on magazine covers in the grocery store checkout line. Tech mogul Preston Sterling buys Third Island. Sterling promises innovation. But in 9 years, Elijah had met the man exactly 3 times. Each visit lasted less than 20 minutes. Each visit felt like a PR stunt. Then, 3 months ago, the papers arrived. Preston Sterling, the man who had ignored Elijah's existence for a decade, suddenly filed for full exclusive custody. He didn't just want visitation. He wanted to take Elijah away from Queens, away from his mother, and move him to a high-security estate in California. Maya was terrified. She had no money for a dream team legal defense. Her court-appointed lawyer was a good man, but he was buried under 50 other cases. He had told Maya the hard truth the night before the hearing. "Maya, I'm sorry. The court looks at stability and resources. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. He lives in a mansion. He argues he can give the boy the world. We are going to lose." Elijah had heard that conversation through the thin walls of their apartment. He heard his mother sobbing into her pillow, begging God for a miracle. But Elijah didn't pray for a miracle. He went to work. For the last 90 days, Elijah hadn't gone to the playground after school. He had walked 6 blocks to the public library. He befriended Mrs. Gable, the head librarian. He told her he needed to learn everything he could about family law, public records, and how to catch a liar. He read books he could barely carry. He printed documents until his library card ran out of credit. He built a case, piece by piece, fueled by the terrifying thought of losing his mother. Now, in the courtroom, Preston Sterling looked at Elijah with a mix of annoyance and pity. He adjusted his $5,000 suit and checked his watch, clearly annoyed that his victory lap was being delayed by a tantrum. "Your Honor," Sterling's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, stood up, smoothing his silk tie. "This is tragic. The child is acting out. It's clear proof of the emotional instability in his current home. We ask that you remove him from the courtroom so we can finalize the order." Elijah jumped down from the chair. He didn't look unstable. He looked determined. "I'm not acting out," Elijah said, stepping toward the bench. "I'm fighting for my life. And if you think I'm just a kid you can ignore, you haven't seen what's in this notebook." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Judge Caldwell, a man known for having zero patience for theatrics, looked at the boy over his spectacles. He saw the taped glasses. He saw the shaking hands. But he also saw the defiance. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, his voice surprisingly soft, "if the subject of this custody hearing has an objection, I'm inclined to hear it." Thorne scoffed, throwing his hands up. "Your Honor, this is a procedural farce. A 9-year-old cannot practice law. He doesn't know what he's talking about." "I'm not trying to practice law," Elijah said, cutting him off. He didn't sound like a robot. He sounded like a kid who had rehearsed this speech in the mirror 100 times. "I'm trying to use common sense. Your Honor, the law says you have to decide based on my best interests, right?" The judge nodded slowly. "That is the standard. Yes." "Well," Elijah stepped closer, hugging his notebook. "How can you decide what's best for me if you haven't even asked me? How can you trust a man who doesn't even know my middle name over the woman who saved my life?" Preston Sterling leaned over to his lawyer, whispering loudly. "Get him out of here, Marcus. This is embarrassing." "Proceed, young man," the judge said, waving a hand at the bailiff to stand down. Elijah dragged a heavy cardboard box from under the table. It scraped loudly against the floor. He struggled with the weight, his small arms straining, until he heaved it onto the defense table with a heavy thud. "Mr. Sterling claims he wants custody because he loves me," Elijah said, opening his black notebook to a page marked with red, sticky notes. "He says my mother is holding me back. Is that correct?" "Yes," Preston said, looking bored. "I want to give you opportunities, Elijah. Private schools, tutors, a real future." "Okay," Elijah said. He pulled a stack of papers from the box. "Exhibit A. These are the visitor logs from my elementary school for the last 5 years. Every parent has to sign in for conferences, plays, and emergencies." He held up the papers, his hands shaking slightly, less now. "My mother's name is on every single page. She has attended 14 parent-teacher conferences. She came to every single play, even the one where I was just a tree. She picked me up every time I had a fever." Elijah dropped the stack on the table. It made a solid, heavy sound. "Mr. Sterling's name appears 0 times. Elijah didn't stop. He pulled out another file. "Exhibit B, my medical records. I have severe asthma. Mr. Sterling, do you know what happens when I have an attack?" Preston blinked. He looked at his lawyer, then back at the boy. "Well, I assume you take medicine. I have people who handle those details." "My throat closes," Elijah said, his voice quiet. "It feels like drowning on dry land. 2 years ago, I was in the ICU for 3 days. My mother slept in a chair next to my bed. She didn't eat. She didn't leave." Elijah pulled out a phone record. "These are the call logs from that week. My mother called your personal cell phone 4 times to tell you I might die. You didn't answer. You didn't call back." "I run a global corporation," Preston snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. "I am a busy man. I can't answer every random call." "But you had time to tweet," Elijah countered. He held up a printed screenshot. "On the exact day I was hooked up to a ventilator, you posted a photo from a yacht in Greece. The caption said, 'Nothing matters more than peace of mind.'" A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. People were shifting in their seats. The judge's face hardened, his eyes narrowing at the billionaire. "This is irrelevant," Lawyer Thorne shouted, jumping up, his face red. "Past attendance doesn't dictate future capability. My client has changed. He wants to step up now. He has the financial means to provide a superior life. The court cannot ignore his resources." "Resources," Elijah repeated. He turned a page in his notebook. This was it, the trap he had set. "That's interesting you bring that up, Mr. Thorne, because you said this was about love. You said he didn't care about the money." "He's a billionaire," Thorne spat. "Of course he doesn't need the child's money. That's absurd." Elijah adjusted his glasses. He looked at his father with a look of profound disappointment. "That's what I thought, too. Until Mrs. Gable at the library showed me how to look up public trust filings in Delaware." Preston Sterling's face went pale. The arrogance vanished instantly, replaced by a look of pure, cold fear. He reached for his water glass, and for the first time his hand shook. The judge was listening now, the narrator's voice would say. But he wasn't ready for what was inside the blue folder. "The trust," Elijah said, the word hanging in the air like smoke. "The Eleanor Sterling Legacy Trust. My grandmother." Elijah pulled a blue folder from his box. "My grandmother died 6 months ago. Mr. Sterling wouldn't let her meet me. He told her I wasn't part of the brand. But she knew I existed. And she didn't trust her own son." Elijah walked toward the bench, his legs feeling heavy but his will ironclad. He held the blue folder out to the judge. "Your Honor, this is a certified copy of Eleanor Sterling's will." The judge took the folder. He opened it, scanning the legal jargon. His eyebrows shot up. "The document states," Elijah said, reciting the words he had memorized during long nights at the library, "that upon her death, the control of her 45% stake in Sterling Tech does not go to Preston Sterling." Elijah turned to face his father. "It goes to her grandchild, me." The courtroom gasped. "But," Elijah continued, his voice rising, "there is a loophole. Clause 4, Section B. If the grandchild is a minor, the legal guardian controls the voting rights of those shares until the child turns 18. "That's a lie!" Preston shouted, jumping to his feet. "He doesn't know what he's talking about." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Judge Caldwell barked, slamming the gavel. "The document looks authentic to me." Elijah turned to the courtroom, making sure everyone understood. "My father is broke, Your Honor. I read the financial news. His company is failing. The board of directors is going to fire him next week unless he has the votes to save himself. He doesn't want me. He wants my vote. If he doesn't get custody of me today, he loses everything tomorrow." The truth was out. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about education. It was a hostile takeover, and Elijah was just a pawn to be used and discarded. Lawyer Thorne looked like he was trying to calculate an escape route. "Your Honor, this is a complex corporate matter. It has no bearing on the child's daily welfare." "It has every bearing," Elijah shouted, slamming his small hand on the table, "because I found out what he plans to do with me once he gets those shares." Preston Sterling was breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead. "You little brat," he hissed. "You think you're so smart?" "I am smart enough," Elijah said, reaching into his pocket. "I'm smart enough to know you lie, and I'm smart enough to record you." Elijah pulled out a cheap plastic digital voice recorder. 3 weeks ago," Elijah told the judge, "Mr. Sterling came to our apartment. He spent the whole time on the balcony. He thought the glass door was soundproof. It wasn't." "Objection!" Thorne screamed, desperate now. "That recording is inadmissible." "Overruled," Judge Caldwell said, his voice like ice. "Play the tape." Elijah pressed the button. The speakers crackled. Then Preston Sterling's voice boomed through the room, arrogant, cruel, and undeniable. "Yeah, the hearing is next month, so... No, don't worry about the kid, it's temporary. As soon as the judge signs the order and I get the voting rights, I'm shipping him off. Yeah, that place in Switzerland. The strict one, year-round boarding, no phone access. I don't care if he cries. I just need the signature. Once I secure the CEO spot, I never have to see the little mistake again." Click. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the sound of a reputation dying. Maya Barnes let out a broken, horrified sob. She hadn't known. She thought he was just selfish, not evil. She looked at the man she had once dated, seeing a monster. Preston Sterling stood there, stripped of his power. There was no spin. There was no PR team. His own voice had just convicted him. "You..." Preston pointed a shaking finger at Elijah. His face twisted into a mask of pure rage. He realized his life was over. The money, the fame, the company, gone. Because of a 9-year-old with a library card. "I am your father," Preston screamed, his voice cracking. "I gave you life." "No," Elijah said, staring him down. "You gave me DNA. She..." Elijah pointed to his mother. "She gave me life. She gave me love. You are just a donor." "You ungrateful little..." Preston lunged. He moved fast, fueled by the desperation of a man who had lost everything. He scrambled over the defense table, hand raised, to strike the boy who had ruined him. "Bailiff!" Judge Caldwell roared. 2 officers were on Preston instantly, tackling him to the ground before he could reach Elijah. But the damage was done. The entire court had seen the violence simmering under the suit. Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He watched his father struggle with the bailiffs, and for the first time, Elijah realized how small Preston Sterling actually was. "I rest my case, Your Honor," Elijah whispered, closing the black notebook. Judge Caldwell took a long moment. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he looked up, there were tears in them. "In 25 years on the bench," the judge said, his voice thick with emotion, "I have listened to thousands of lawyers. I have heard Harvard graduates and the most expensive legal minds in the country. But I have never seen a defense as honest, as brave, and as devastating as the one presented by Mr. Barnes today." The judge turned to Preston Sterling, who was now handcuffed, slumped in a chair, looking at the floor. "Mr. Sterling, not only is your petition for custody denied with prejudice, meaning you can never file again, but I am submitting the transcript of this hearing and that audio recording to the district attorney. Attempted fraud, perjury, assault." Preston didn't even look up. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am appointing an independent guardian to oversee the Eleanor Sterling Trust. The voting rights will be executed solely in Elijah's interest. You won't see a dime of that money, and you won't see this boy again until he decides he wants to see you." The gavel came down. Bang. It wasn't just a sound. It was the end of a nightmare. Maya grabbed Elijah, burying her face in his neck, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." "You did protect me, Mom," Elijah said, hugging her back. "You taught me to read." The aftermath was swift. The recording leaked. Court records are public after all. The board of directors fired Preston Sterling before the week was out. His reputation was incinerated. He lost his company, his mansions, and his status. But for Elijah, life changed in a different way. 3 months later, Elijah and Maya were no longer in the cramped apartment. The trust, now managed properly, released funds for their care. They bought a modest house. Maya finished her nursing degree. They were safe. But Elijah didn't stop going to the library. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable, the librarian, found him at his usual table. But he wasn't alone. He was sitting with a nervous-looking girl, maybe 10 years old, and her crying mother. "What are you doing, Elijah?" Mrs. Gable asked gently. Elijah adjusted his taped-up glasses, opening a new notebook. "Her landlord is trying to evict them illegally because the heat broke," Elijah said, pointing to a highlighted section in a tenant rights manual. "They can't afford a lawyer, so I'm showing them how to fight back." Elijah Barnes didn't just save himself that day in court. He learned a lesson that he would carry for the rest of his life. The world is full of giants. They have money, they have suits, and they have loud voices. They bank on your fear. They bank on you staying silent. But giants have a weakness. They are arrogant. They don't look down to see the little people studying the rule book. Elijah proved that you don't need $1 billion to find justice. You just need the truth, a library card, and the courage to stand up when everyone else tells you to sit down. Thanks for watching. We put a lot of effort into crafting quality content, from the script to over 60 custom images in each video. While other channels focus on quantity, we focus on making each moment count. This is our second video, so some images may not be fully consistent, but we're working hard to improve. Your support by liking and subscribing will help us continue delivering powerful, high-quality content. Stay tuned for an even better experience.